Welcome back to another installment of Replay or Reject, PlayStation Classic Edition. Just a quick recap, I'm giving each game on the PlayStation Classic 1 hour to win me over. After that hour, I'll make my determination on whether the game would be worth replaying in the future, or if it will get added to my ever-growing list of reject games that I never want to play again. There's only one game on this list that I've actually beaten before. The rest of them either I have barely played, never played, or never even heard of. Well, that's enough preamble, so let's get to it. Now on to Twisted Metal, which is yet another game that I've never played, but I'm at least aware of the franchise. This is a series that I also feel makes sense to be on the PS Classic, since I think it is a Sony title. Most of my experience with vehicular combat up to this point, though, was a little bit more Mushroom Kingdom flavored. I honestly never played much of the actual battle modes in the Mario Kart games, though. I was always more into just the regular racing mode, which still did have weapons, but that just wasn't the main focus. I kinda thought that Twisted Metal was a series that was still going on today, but from the Wikipedia timeline, the last game came out way back in 2012, so it's been well over a decade. Looking at the list, a couple of these games also look like they may have just been re-releases, so the franchise didn't have as many entries as I thought. In fairness, going back to my Mario Kart example, Nintendo only releases one per console, so it's not like there's a ton of those games either, so that doesn't really indicate anything good or bad to me. Into the menu, all we have is two gameplay options, either one-player contest or two-player duel.
I memorized all of Wikipedia instead of having friends.
Okay, so one gameplay option. Scrolling through the character list, the only one I've ever heard of is Sweet Tooth. I think he's like the Twisted Metal mascot, and looks like they have him referenced on all the box arts. Other than him though, none of the other remaining drivers stood out to me as particularly memorable. There's a little variety here at least, with 12 to choose from, and they all have a different type of vehicle. I gotta say though, if I was entering a vehicular gladiator ring in real life, the motorcycle would have to be the dumbest choice. Like, I'm sure it's faster and more maneuverable than the others, but my god, I want to have at least something that offered at least a little bit of protection around me. Selecting each of the characters, it gives you a little bit of backstory on the vehicle itself and also the driver. It also tells you what the special weapon is and gives a quick look at the stats as well. None of that meant much to me at the start, so I just picked Sweet Tooth. I mean, Needles Kane, since apparently Sweet Tooth is the name of the ice cream truck, not the guy. They pit me against Thumper.
His name is Thumper.
And I do my best to try to get a handle on these controls, but my god, this game controls like ass. I went into the menu to see if any of the other control options were any better, but there just didn't seem to be a good layout for me, so I just did my best to make do with the defaults. The movement's all handled by the D-pad, which I guess makes sense, but it just feels wrong for some reason. Maybe because the weapons all just fire directly out the front of the vehicle, so I'm trying to steer around and get my opponent in my sights, but then I only have a split-second window to actually deal any damage. I did somehow win this first fight though, and moved on to my second battle, which had me going against 3 opponents this time.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
This is a much larger area than the last, I guess to accommodate the increased opponent count, but that just means I spent a lot of time driving around in circles looking for somebody to shoot. I didn't do too great on this level. I was just barely able to kill the cab driver before I lost my final life to the trucker. Okay, that was fun. But since there were no other game modes, I just jumped back in with a different character. I chose Yellow Jacket this time, which is the cab, and the driver looks like he hasn't slept in 3 days. I figured maybe a less top-heavy car would be a little bit better this time. I won again, but I still had that same issue. I just had such a hard time landing any hits, so it felt like the battle took forever. I move on to the second city level fight, and while I did survive a little bit longer, it was mostly because I was just running away.
Like a bitch.
I mean, I wasn't purposely trying to run and hide, but what I was attempting to do was to do circles to hopefully come up from behind one of the enemies and be able to have more than 2 seconds to shoot at them. Not a surprise, I ended up losing again. Well, back in for round 3, and this time I go with the cop car piloted by that dude from Firefly.
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. They're the same picture.
They put me up against Sweet Tooth, and bro came out of the gate swinging. He did a ton of damage at the very beginning, but I was able to fight back and did pick up the victory with barely any health remaining. In round 2 again, I used that same strategy from last time since it did help a little bit, and I just kept running away and trying to flank enemies when I could. I was taking a lot of shots from behind though, phrasing, so I think the CPU was trying to do the same thing. I ended up making it to the final 2 this time, so it was an improvement, but I still got thumped by Thumper. Okay, so apparently 4th time is the charm. I picked Warthog with the Vietnam vet disgruntled Randy Couture looking guy as my driver, and had my most decisive first battle so far. It still wasn't anything overly impressive, but for me it was a good fight. Round 2 went pretty well also. Not only did I finally actually win, but I only lost 1 life in doing so. I'm not sure how much of that was actually due to my skill or how much was just due to the CPU drivers also damaging each other, but hey, I'll take it. I did get a mild sense of accomplishment for getting to move on to the new level after all those retries. I could have and probably should have been using the password system to skip that first fight at least, but also I may have just needed that extra practice anyway. Now on to Freeway Free-For-All, and this time there were 5 opponents, and as expected, I didn't win. I survived just barely over 2 minutes, cause having to deal with an increased number of opponents as well as trying to learn the new layouts, I was one of the first ones out. Oh well. By this point I had just passed the 50-minute mark out of my hour, so I had just enough time to give it one last go. This time with Roadkill. I was able to make it to Freeway Free-For-All again, but then, just like the first time, I was eliminated pretty quickly. I was out of time anyway, so there really wasn't much of a chance that I was going to make it on to the next level, no matter what. Unsurprisingly, this game's going to be another reject for me. I was actually really expecting to like this one prior to playing it. It's a cool concept, and it spawned enough sequels that I thought it would be awesome. But like many games on this classic console, it's held back by the controls. Even though I was improving a little bit as I played, and did get further and further each time, I just never felt like I got the hang of them. I'm sure the controls were a product of the time, and so even though I don't want to play this one again, maybe I'll give some of the later games a try. I don't know if by the PS2 or PS3 versions they added a way to aim independently from steering or something. I mean, even in the old Mario Kart games, it's not perfect, but you can still sorta guide the green shell in a general direction when you fire them, depending on how your thumb is on the D-pad. That alone I think would make this game a lot more fun, but I also have no idea how they would have possibly implemented that on this original PlayStation non-DualShock controller. So I can't blame the game devs for that. I also would have liked a little bit more than just the 2 modes. Since I had no one else to try out dual mode with, there was nothing else I could do during this playthrough. In fairness, I don't have any concrete ideas on any other modes that they could have done other than maybe like a regular racing mode or something. And if I had been having more fun with this, I probably wouldn't have cared whether there were other modes or not. So for the time being, I suppose I'll just have to get my fill of crazy clowns and cars elsewhere.
What's that about clown business?
Do I stutter, bitch?